Hi, everybody. Happy Friday, and welcome to another episode of Tarot by Hilary Live. I am your hostess with the mostest, Hilary of tarotbyhilary.com. It's right down there if you want to book a reading with me. And this episode is all about court cards. So if you have found that the court cards are a mystifying endeavor for you when you're trying to read tarot, this episode is for you. Apologies for being 5 minutes late to the live broadcast. And if you are here live, as usual, I want you guys to shout out where you're tuning in from. And even if you're watching the replay of this episode, please go ahead and say replay and where you're tuning in from. So a little bit late coming home tonight while I'm doing this live broadcast. So much so that I haven't even sat down and had my water. Still got the remnants of a gravelly voice over here from when I was sick at the beginning of the month. So yeah, it's so much fun. All right. So I've got the solo mode on Be Live here. So hopefully that's working out fine. Don't know if there's any real difference between solo mode or not. So let me know if you can't see me or hear me, and I will try and troubleshoot that right away. And let me just fix up the agenda a little bit. Courts, I was about to say, instead of court cards. Silly me. Okay. So, I also wanted to give you a little bit of an astrology update while we're here. So today, at the time of recording, the new moon, I believe, entered Aquarius. So let me pull up that information for you guys so I know that I'm actually quoting this correctly. And as you guys may or may not know, I am not an astrologer. That is not my forte. I am a tarot reader, but I do know enough astrology to be dangerous. So that's my take on my level of astrology. And I do have, if you're interested in astrology, I do have a book recommendation for you of a book that I just picked up. So stay tuned for that. Let me pull up my documents to make sure I've got all of my notes for tonight's episode, all about court cards. And also, let me pull up the astrology for today. And let me just make sure that everything's still recording. Everything looks good here. Crossing my fingers and toes that keeps going. Let me see. So, as always, the astrology information is coming to you from my dear friend Teresa Reed, aka the Tarot Lady. If you want a reading from her or you want to work with her, her website is thetarotlady.com. But just today, she launched her Patreon account. So, and I think that'll probably be the best opportunity if you want to work with her one-on-one directly, because she is making space to write more excellent books. She is a really excellent writer, and she's a wonderful astrologer and my personal business mentor for the last, 9 years. Must be 9 years. Yeah. Because I won the Tarot Apprentice Contest in 2011. So, and it's 2020 this year. So yeah, she's been on my ass for 9 years straight. I love you, Teresa. Okay, so new moon is in Aquarius on today, January 24th, and it's a sweet spot for setting intentions around networking, technology, innovation, originality, groups, associations, and future endeavors. And let me see if there's anything else. And that the moon, the new moon is officially here at 4:42 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So currently, right now, it's about 6:41 Eastern Standard Time. So we are in the thick of new moon in Aquarius energy. So that is your astrological update from Teresa Reed. Thank you, Teresa, as always, for the great astrological information. Devon is here. Hello, Devon. Okay, so while we're on the subject of astrology, before we move into talking about the tarot court cards, I happened to pick up a book from my local Barnes & Noble, which doesn't really have a huge New Age section to it because it is also a college bookstore. So it tends to have more a smaller sections of like the general Barnes & Noble sections, and more focused on like getting your textbooks if you happen to be that college student. So New Age section in my closest bookstore is usually pretty thin pickings, but I still go in there every so often to see who's on the shelves and also if my friends are on the shelves, because that's really, really fun to find books on the shelves that your friends have written. So I actually was able to purchase Courtney Weber's Tarot for One at that Barnes & Noble. So I was very, very excited. And that's actually a book that I contributed to as well. Chapter 7, what missing cards are telling you, like what your tarot cards are telling you when they're not present in a reading. So if you're interested in reading cards for yourself instead of reading for others, you can do both. Tarot for One by Courtney Weber is an excellent book. But we're talking about astrology right now before we move into the court cards. So when I see a book in the New Age section that I want, that is popular, I've heard about, or it's like a new release, and they actually have a copy there in that bookstore when the pickings are pretty slim, I get very, very excited and I automatically like snap it up. So I have been hearing a lot of really, really good reviews for this book that just got released in 2020, this month, I believe. And if I pronounced your name wrong, I am so, so sorry. Please correct me. But this is from Chani Nicholas, and it's called You Were Born for This, Astrology for Radical Self-Acceptance. So here it is. And look, you know I love that iridescent shit, man. Gorgeous cover, hardcover. Look at that. And if I wasn't going to purchase it, which I was, if I wasn't going to purchase it, the back cover blurb really got me. So it's a quote from here. Astrology is a relentless reminder that we are the way we are on purpose, and that who we are has a purpose, has value, has within it a blessing. The setbacks, difficulties, and challenges we face are all a part of what makes us unique. So that's the back cover of You Were Born for This, Astrology for Radical Self-Acceptance by Chani Nicholas. So I've heard a lot of really, really, really great feedback and recommendations and reviews of this book. So I just picked it up tonight and I'm already... I'm not that far. I'm not that far. I'm on like page 2. But I will update you guys if I think this is a good book, but I've heard really, really wonderful things from different astrologers about this book. So, and like I was saying before with the astrology, the Astro Weather from the AstroBiz Digest by Teresa Reed, aka the Tarot Lady. She is both a tarot reader and an astrologer. My forever on my ass business mentor, she recommended picking this up. So there you go. You were born for this, Chani Nicholas. I'm really looking forward to reading it. And this has been the Book Corner, Tarot by Hilary Live. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you guys have any books that you've been reading in like the New Age topics and tarot or whatever that you've been really digging, or it's helped open your eyes about certain situations or helped you uncover stumbling blocks to reading tarot or divination or whatever, go ahead and pop it in the chat. I would love to hear it. Or if you're watching this on YouTube on the replay later, go ahead and pop it in there. Love recommendations for books. I'm trying to read 50 books this year, and I always fall short of my reading goal. And I think this is the year that I'm actually going to match it, because I used to be such a voracious reader, and now for some reason I don't do it as much anymore. I really want to get back into reading books, like physical books, and also books on my Kindle. I can't help it. Anyway, Mendy is here. Hello, so glad I found you. Hello, Mendy. Nice to meet you. Okay, so tonight we are talking about the tarot court cards. And I just want to preface the court cards by saying this. I teach them a little bit of a different way. And when I'm teaching them, I try not to put them on a pedestal separate to the other minor arcana of the tarot. And the reason why is this. When I first started learning tarot, I got in my head about court cards, and they really messed me up. And I think it was because in different books that I was reading or different tarot decks that I was using, or the guidebooks that went along with the tarot deck, they seem to have categorized the court cards in a separate section, and kind of put them on this pedestal separate from the minor arcana. And it really, like, I don't know, it was something about having them separate to the minor arcana really threw me for a loop. So the way I teach tarot and the court cards is I tend not to separate them from the rest of the minor arcana. Yes, they're court cards, but when we separate them out, I feel like it almost becomes making a mountain out of a molehill with regard to the court cards. Katie, hi Katie, hope you're doing great. So that is my stance on the court cards. So every tarot deck has a structure of 78 cards. And if you're interested in going back to like the roots of tarot, the structure of the tarot or whatever, I'm sure I have an earlier episode about what makes a tarot deck a tarot deck. In fact, I'm pretty sure I did, where I talked about oracle cards and the differences between a tarot deck and oracle cards. So if you want to learn more about that, there is an episode for you, and you can go ahead and search that either in the Facebook videos or on YouTube. I'm pretty sure it's there. I'll try and embed it in the video after we're done with the recording. So it's like there for you already. And I'll have to make a note of the timestamp. Around 13 minutes, I talked about the differences between tarot and oracle cards. So the tarot deck is 78 cards, and it has a major arcana, it has a minor arcana, and the part of the minor arcana that we are talking about tonight are the court cards. Now, the minor arcana has 4 different suits: wands, swords, cups, and pentacles. And they run from ace to 10, or 1 to 10. And then they have, normally, page, knight, queen, king. And that's the order that it goes in from lowest to highest. And each of these court cards have different energies associated with them through the filter of their particular suit. So like very quickly off the top of my head, pages usually indicate youth of the tarot, but also a messenger of the tarot. And then it's almost like a tarot formula where it's just like, here's the youth of or the messenger if you got the page, plus the suit. So the suit of wands is usually about fire. The fire, the will, the drive, why you do what you do can be associated with creativity as well. So then you have, okay, is this a message of creativity? equals the interpretation? Or is this a person that is creative? Or is this someone that is like interning as a painter or in a creative field? That could be what the Page of Wands means. And so as I'm talking, this example kind of shows you why people get so hung up on the court cards, because sometimes it can be so many different things. And it also can be, is this a person, or is this an event, or is this a situation? Because the court cards can represent any or all of that. And how do you know the difference between is this a person in the situation, or is it a situation or event or a location? Like, how am I supposed to know what that noun is when I'm trying to interpret the cards? And a quick answer to that is context. So if you are unsure, either pull a clarifying card asking, is this a person, place, thing, situation, event? Or if you're doing this in the midst of a tarot spread, you can look in the context of the tarot spread to give you an indication of what this interpretation might be, or whether it is a person in this situation, whether it is a thing or a place, or for pages, for example, whether or not this is an actual person, a youthful person, or a child, or is this a messenger, or is this a message from a youthful person, or like out of the mouths of babes comes this wisdom? Because oftentimes when I see pages, especially like Page of Swords or Page of Cups, I think immaturity, but I also think about the wisdom of beginner's mind and how wise children can sometimes be when they're just speaking truthfully. Because sometimes as we grow up, we get that filter, we build that filter in, but sometimes it gets lost, the message gets lost in all of our filtering. Do you know what I mean? So I hope that makes sense to everyone. I see we have, I think, 5 or 6 people here in the live. So go ahead and chime in if you haven't said already where you're tuning in from. I would love to see your lovely faces in the chat. And if that's making sense to you, go ahead and say a hell yeah or hell no. And if you have any questions about the court cards or tarot topics in general, please go ahead and drop them in the chat, and I will get to them when we get to the Q&A portion at the end of the episode. Okay, so that was a quick example of why people get so mucked up when they talk about court cards. My opinion, and as always, these episodes are based on my opinion, and your mileage may vary. I really love what Ethany, and if you want to tune into some of her podcasts and videos, it's ethony.com, ETHONY.com. When she starts her episodes, she usually says, as always, while you're listening to this broadcast or whatever, reading my words, take what is applicable to you, or what you feel, or what is resonating with you, and leave the rest. So like, take what you will and discard what's not working for you. I will say the same, not in my weird New Yorker accent instead of her lovely Australian accent. So I love you, Ethany. Mandy is tuning in from Maryland. Awesome. Cool. Great. Glad you're tuning in. And I think it's a first time viewer. Yay. So I'm going to say what Ethany says, like, take what works for you and discard what doesn't work for you. And I'm also going to kindly and gently suggest, experiment. If you don't know how things are going to work out, or you don't know if that interpretation is going to work out, like, you're not going to know unless you try. And that's what I say about tarot in general. Like, you've got to experiment, you've got to practice, you've got to find what works for you. And you're not going to find what works for you unless you're willing to try it out. So if you're reading tarot right now and you're at the stage where you're not reading for money, but you do want to get better at it, ask your friends if you can read their cards for them. Ask for an exchange. You read their cards for them in exchange for feedback or testimonials. Because if you do ever want to charge for readings or get into the business of tarot, which is a completely separate issue, I might talk about it on later episodes. That way you'll have a bank of testimonials already ready for you when you're ready to go pro. And it's fine if you don't want to go pro. There are some wonderful tarot readers that just do it personally for themselves or for their friends and are not professional tarot readers. When I say professional tarot readers, I mean someone who reads your cards for money, like me. So, but yeah, you want guinea pigs in that matter, and just be honest. I want to learn tarot. I need a couple of people to read for, or if it's a very personal thing for you and you just want to read for yourself, that's totally cool too. But make sure you take copious notes for yourself or record your readings for yourself, because so often what happens is you think that your reader said something or that you said something in a reading, and then you play it back and it's just like, oh, that's what I wanted to hear, not what actually was said. So make sure you keep meticulous notes or record yourself if you're reading for yourself. And I would say if people are being guinea pigs for you, make sure that they record their readings. That way you can get better feedback on how you're doing, how your interpretations may or may not be right or wrong. Because unfortunately, sometimes we have to give ourselves the space to be wrong so that we can get to the right. And sometimes interpretations come from knowing what the right interpretation is feeling it in your body. And sometimes you're not going to know that until you get it wrong. Like sometimes you have to get it wrong before you get it right. So I hope that makes sense to everyone. And in the midst of me talking all about that, hopefully I have pulled up my my notes for court cards. Yep, it's in here somewhere. So, like I was saying before, the court cards of the tarot can represent real people, events, or energies that we need to either embody to navigate a situation, or people, events, energies that we need to react to in a situation. So sometimes a Queen of Swords could come up to indicate maybe not a short-tempered or curt person, but how you need to embody yourself in order to navigate best through the situation. And oftentimes when I talk about the court cards, I do get that phrase of like knowing your audience. That the energies of the court cards can be very helpful to us to pivot ourselves when we feel like we are reacting maybe poorly to a situation, or we feel like we're trying to get through a situation or push through a situation, and we're finding resistance there. It might be because we have to inhabit a different energy. Like, for example, I'm a very Queen of Swords person. I'm very blunt. I am very direct. And sometimes I am cruel to be kind and very short and brusque. Tough love. And some situations don't call for that energy. So it can be very difficult for me as a Queen of Swords person to put aside that particular personality or that way of dealing with such a situation, and maybe putting on the mantle of the Queen of Cups, which has more compassion, more understanding, and more going with the flow. So not only when you're working with court cards, I feel like a really good exercise is looking through the court cards, separating out the court cards from the rest of the deck, the tarot deck, and looking at those cards and figuring out who you are normally, like in a vacuum, what you would embody, and then applying that to different situations and seeing how that might not work how it might be an oil or water situation, and then choosing a different card that you think may be a better energy for you to present yourself in that way to be able to navigate through that situation. So I know it sounds very woo and very psychological, but I mean, this is what the tarot can give us. This is the kind of tools that the tarot can give us, is ways of navigating through the world, or mitigating or avoiding disasters. And sometimes it is about embodying an energy or court card energy that might seem foreign to you and uncomfortable to you to put on, but might be the best mantle for you to put on to be able to navigate the situation. So does that make sense to everyone? I would love to hear in the comments if that's making sense to you. And if there's any other Queen of Swords people in the chat right now, I'd love to hear it. I'm always very surprised when I have clients coming back to me and saying, like, I don't want my reader to sugarcoat. Like, I like your tell it like it is style. And that, I believe, is a very Queen of Swords way of being. So Queen of Swords, no nonsense, just the facts, ma'am, kind of communication. But yeah, sometimes she kind of comes off as a bitch. And I'm allowed to say that because I am saying that I'm a Queen of Swords. So Katie says, yes, making sense. I'm going to take a sip of water here. As always, when you're doing this kind of energetic work, even just talking about tarot for me takes a lot out of me. I want to keep myself hydrated. I would recommend, as I'm taking a water break, you go ahead and take a water break too. Okay, so now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of each and every one of the court cards. And I'm going to use, as a teaching assistant, my good friend, the tarot coloring book. So let me turn and get it, and hopefully I won't completely ruin my bookshelf. I do have book recommendations. If you just stay tuned until the end of the episode, I will tell you all about it. I've already mentioned one of the authors, Ethne. So her book is very, very helpful, but I'll tell you all about it after the episode. So the tarot coloring book, let me Vanna this, okay, by Teresa Reed, is an excellent resource, not only on court cards, but on the tarot in general. She gives a great introduction on what tarot is, what the roots of tarot is, and also there is an amazing amount of information that you can glean for yourself when you're coloring a particular tarot card. All right, I'm going to have to move Chani's book over so that I can work a little bit more. Mendy's asking, totally makes sense. Do you apply elements? Yes. So yeah, I'm going to get into this in a second here, Mendy, but totally makes sense. Do you apply elements to a particular court member? For example, the Page of Swords is air. Yes, that is the association that I make. I just want to give a little caveat for people. So there are certain people, not me, but there are certain people that read in such a way that wands is air and swords is fire. And if you work with those associations and those associations work for you, by all means, go ahead and do that. However, if you are doing that, you really need to have kind of a tarot deck that follows that symbolism, because oftentimes when I see a Page of Swords or Ace of Swords, I see a lot of air elements. I see feathers. I see winds and clouds whipping back and forth in the symbolism for like air cards for swords. So if you are going to switch the association between wands and swords, your tarot deck will probably need to reflect that as well. So I hope that makes sense. But very quickly, wands is fire, swords is air. And again, you can switch those if that is your particular liking or your associations. Pentacles is earth. Pentacles are coins, earth. And cups is usually water. So those are the elemental associations that go along with each court suit. So Mendy, thank you for asking. I was going to get to that, but thank you for keeping me on track. Let's go back to all about court cards. Yeah. So yes, the tarot coloring book is excellent. Highly recommended. And it's nice and big too. And it has a spiral bound here so you can lay it out flat. So as you're coloring, you're not having to like push down one page or one side of the spread in order to color. It lays flat. Look, see? Nice and flat as you're working. And then on one side, it has keywords and associations and symbology and reverse meaning and the elements, like Mendy was asking about what element is associated with it. Gives a little blurb about what Two of Cups is. Like, for example, I just turned to the Two of Cups. Upright meaning, reversed meaning. If you work with reversals, there is an episode for that too. All about reversed cards. You don't have to work with reversals if that's not your jam, but here is a reversed meaning if you do work with reversals. And then along the side is the couples that, not the couples, because we're looking at the Two of Cups, the symbols that are associated most with that particular card. So like I said, tarot has a structure, 78 cards in a tarot deck, and most tarot decks have the same cards associated with it. Like you're always going to see the Page of Swords. You're always going to see the Two of Cups. You're always going to see, or Two of Air. You're always going to see the Lovers, the Devil, etc., etc. That's what makes a tarot deck a tarot deck. However the artist depicts those cards is going to be a little bit different, especially if they happen to have a theme that they're going with, like the Zombie Tarot, like the Mystic Mondays tarot deck, where you have like the Ten of Wands here. But notice, see, Ten of Wands, fire. Notice that the background is very orangey and pinky, so it has that color association with fire too. So then here, so most of the time though, the symbols are even the same, give or take. So like there's usually a couple in the Two of Cups. There's usually a winged lion at the top here. There's usually the catechus symbol here. There's usually the colors. Teresa does give the colors from the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith deck, like in a list here, but then you are free to color as you see fit. So Mendy's saying, let me go. Mendy's saying, I think I need that coloring book. Yeah, you do. It's really, really great. I love it. And also, one of the recommendations in the front, this is my signed copy, by the way. Praise for the tarot coloring book. I did get to see a couple of these pages before it went to press so that I could give my own stamp of approval on there. So I am here in here. When Teresa Reed does something, I sit up and pay attention. Always. Hilary Perry Haggerty, tarot card reader, writer, editor, and teacher, tarotbyhilary.com. It's right here. And Mendy, if you pick up a copy, you'll be able to see that too. So definitely recommended. So Mendy's asking or saying, I have read that each core card has their own element too. Yes. Page is air, knight is fire, queen is water, and king is earth. So they have both their own element plus the suit element. Yes, you are correct about that. However, I try not to get into that nitty gritty. And that's the reason why I'm going to give recommendations for books to read about the court cards, because you could like go really dive deep into the court cards and their different associations. But yes, you are absolutely correct. I'll repeat that again. Each court card has their own element too. Page is air, knight is fire, queen is water, king is earth. So they have both their own element plus the suit element. So like page of wands, for example, would be page air plus wands fire. And then how would that look? So again, great information. Thank you for bringing that up. I'm not going to get into the nitty gritties about all that, because there are so many different ways to read tarot. And I try not to, I don't think it's necessarily what they call elemental dignities, which is not the same thing as saying, this is this element, this is this element. Elemental dignities kind of is like a formula of, I think it's like cups and water don't go well together. They don't mesh well together because it kind of becomes mud and it kind of becomes sticky. While air and fire tend to not go well either because they tend to exacerbate each other. So that's what I'm talking about when I talk about elemental dignities. And so then it kind of becomes like you get a little bit overwhelmed with the formulas of which element is which and when. And if that's your jam, fine, great, go with it. But it's not really my jam. So I tend to look at more of the symbology from like the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith, or what the card is saying to me just based on how it looks. But thank you, Mendy, for bringing that up. It is a good point, and some people do teach the court cards that way. So, and I would recommend picking up the coloring book. So back to court cards. Yes. So yes, pick up this book. It's really good. So Teresa gives all this advice on how to use this coloring book, quick intro to tarot, all the colors in the deck and what they mean, how to use tarot in your everyday life. So many great things in this book besides just being able to color. But like in coloring, I have learned so much about like different symbols, and different symbols have jumped out at me because I have colored them. So, and I really should just sit down with this book and like color more. But like, for example, the Fool is the only one that I've colored completely all the way through. So this is my interpretation of the Fool. And then I wrote underneath the Zen saying, leap and the net shall appear, which is something that I usually associate with the Fool card when I see it. So that is my rad Fool card. So instead of using like the really yellow and red tunic, I use like a lime green and a chartreuse. I use some purple boots, purple bag, feather. But like, I never realized there was a feather on the top of his head. I never realized that he was holding a rose in his hand. I kept the Fool's dog white as per the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith. And if you happen to look at my logo, which is up here, see the little dog barking up the tree? That is the Fool's dog from the tarot deck. So yeah, fun behind the scenes look at my logo. But here's another thing that I noticed. The Magician, that's not just a regular belt, it's a snake. I had no idea that the Magician's belt was a snake until I colored it in. So, and also she mentions that in the symbols. The snake belt around his waist. Snakes symbolize renewal and rebirth. So there you go. But remember, we are focused on the court cards tonight. So let's move to that section. And I'm going to read straight out of this book. So, in most decks, the court cards depict human figures, men, women, and children. These figures often represent people in your life, as well as specific opportunities that you're manifesting at this time. So again, how to know what interpretation is the right interpretation? Use context. Use the context of the spread in your reading. If you happen to pull a court card as your card of the day, or like one card, pull another card. It's okay. Like, you are making your own rules about how you work with your tarot deck. It's completely fine to pull another card to clarify. But before you pull another card to clarify, really look at the court card. Think about what you were thinking about at the time that you shuffled and pulled that court card, and what you were asking about too. Don't forget that the question that you asked about is part of the context of the reading just as much as the cards that come up. So you might have been asking about maybe dealing with your mother, or dealing with a sensitive issue with your mother, your brother, your lover, your sister, your friend, and a court card came up. That court card may be indicative of that particular person's energy, or how they are approaching that situation, or it could be a recommendation on how you should hold yourself in that situation. Like I was saying before, like if you're talking about a sensitive like a argument that you had with your mother, and your mother tends to be like a Queen of Swords type, but you're getting the Queen of Cups, or you're getting the Queen of Wands. Queen of Wands to me would be get creative about the issue, think outside the box. And Queen of Cups to me would be trying to see it from her perspective, going with the flow, having compassion, that kind of thing. So if you got like maybe the Page of Cups in that situation, it might have to do with, roles need to be either reversed. Like she needs to be the page, like the kid, and you need to be the parent, or vice versa. You need to remember that that's your mother that you're talking about, and you're their kid. And some relationships don't change even though you're both adults. Wow, this is like therapy for me. Anyway, so pages in general, and this is coming from Teresa Reed's excellent The Tarot Coloring book. I do have more recommendations for books if you want to get deeper into the court cards. So pages are youthfulness, new seeds, messages. I do tend to think of them as the children of the tarot. Knights are young men swinging into action, perhaps on a quest. Now, remember, with gender, it doesn't have to be like a Queen of Cups doesn't have to be a woman, and a Knight of Wands doesn't have to be a man, or a king of Pentacles doesn't have to be a man. It could very easily be a woman. So remember that gender can be fluid, and we don't have to ascribe these court cards so rigidly or regimentedly with regard to gender. So knights, young men swinging into action, perhaps on a quest. I usually think of knights are like the brash teenagers of the tarot. Sometimes they do things without thinking. But sometimes with the knights, you have to remember what the knight's function was in feudal society. What did the knight do? They protected. They served their king, and they protected their king. If you're talking about chivalry and chivalrous love, like the Knight of Cups takes on a whole new idea. So just think about that as you're looking at the court cards. Queens are feminine power and nurturing energy. And kings are a mature male, masculine leadership and mastery. Now that last bit, mastery, is what I was going to say with regard to kings. Kings are usually masters of that particular suit that they're representing. So like King of Cups would be mastery of emotions, feelings, water, mastery of intuition, perhaps too, because the cup suit can be quite a bit about intuition as well with the water element. So, one important note with the court cards and all of the cards in your tarot deck for that matter, try not to get overly fixated on the gender of the figure in the card. Thank you, Teresa. Remember that everyone carries both masculine and feminine energy. For example, getting a Knight card doesn't always indicate that a young, action-oriented man is about to show up in your life. And a middle-aged woman might possess that same youthful masculine energy in her own way. So if you're doing a tarot reading and you pull a card depicting a knight or any other human figure, try not to interpret the image too literally. So I think a lot of the time when people are working with the court cards, they tend to go for maybe the more traditional meanings. Sometimes you can ascribe a significator based on like appearance. And there are ways to do that. You can Google it. I would suggest Googling it because to me, I don't groove with that. I more think of it as personality based rather than physically based. But like there are some older tarot books like from I think like the 60s, 70s that would ascribe like the Knight of Wands is a pale man with red hair and, you know, very slim and this, and it's just like, whoa. I never want to say that to a client because it's just like, then they're going to be looking for a redheaded guy instead of looking at someone that has that exact personality traits, but they're focused more on the physical and that person showing up, that they completely bypass the person that I was talking about. Like, no. So I'm not going to talk about that in this episode. You can Google that though. And it is kind of quirky and kitschy and kind of fun to look at, but at the same time, that is not how I read tarot. So keep that in mind. Dina's here. Hi, Dina. Welcome. So pages. So let's go through the pages. Actually, I'll leave it up to you guys since we have quite a few people here. Do you want me to go through the quartz by suit or do you want me to go through the quartz by type? So like all the pages first, all the knights first, all the queens first, and all the kings first, or do you want me to go by cups, wands, pentacles, swords? Up to you. While you're deciding, remember to put it in the chat. I'm going to take another water break. I could put on the Jeopardy music, but Dina's saying type. Anyone else? Because if no one speaks up, we're going by type. All right, I'll give it another second, and then we're going by type because Dina said yes, type. Katie says, I'm open to either, but type sounds good to me. All right, sold. We're going by type. Okay, so we're going to start with the pages first. So I'm going to start with the Page of Cups since it's the first one that's coming up. And then I'm going to have to flip over to the next page. So Page of Cups is the element of water. Pages represent young people and youthful energy. And so the Page of Cups carries a sensitive, creative, and idealistic energy. So some of the key words associated with the Page of Cups would be like a cherished child who sense what people are feeling, sometimes can be very intuitive. Pages are often messengers, so the Page of Cups might be a message of love or happy news, or clear intuitive flashes of insight as well. Remember what I said before, sometimes cups can indicate that intuition is working. You don't have to look for the High Priestess card every single time you're asking about intuition. Sometimes the Suit of Cups can show up to show that kind of insight as well. So, and then the reversed Page of Cups is can indicate like emotional immaturity, refusal to grow up, Peter Pan syndrome, or unhappy news or unwelcome advances, or lack of imagination or oversensitivity. And that really goes in keeping sometimes with my interpretation of reversals. Sometimes it's not necessarily an outright negation of the card's upright meaning. Sometimes it can mean a blockage or miscommunication or something's like a little bit slightly off, or it can indicate going to extremes. So Dina asks, do you find in readings that pages are messengers? Again, you might want to look at the replay. I did speak about that before. You really have to know the context. So look at the context and the surrounding cards. And if you're not sure of the context, ask about the, think about what you were thinking about when you were pulling the card, or pull a clarifying card. But it always comes back to the question and the context of what you're asking about in order to feel your way between, is it a messenger, or is it a youthful energy, or is this something that I need to embody? Again, like that's going to be, honestly, that to me is the biggest stumbling block. Is how do I know? How do I know what this interpretation is for this particular situation? It is, and why am I not pulling that up there? It really has to be a feel your way kind of thing. And sometimes, even based on the context, if you get that intuitive sense that it's just like, no, I really feel that this is a person in this situation, like go with that feeling. Be willing to be wrong on occasion with your interpretations, because the more times you get it wrong, you know, like you're that much closer to getting it right. So I hope that helps. But yeah, rewind back, like when you watch the replay, I did talk a little bit about that, how to know. Sometimes it is about using context clues in the spread, and sometimes it is about feeling that intuition in your body, whether or not this is a person or a messenger or a situation or a location. Okay, so that's Page of Cups. I'm going to fast forward over to the next one, which is the Page of Wands. So Page of Wands, element is fire. Again, look back in your, go back to your associations. So if you do flippy on the wands air, swords fire thing, if you want to do it that way, then that's fine. But that's not how I read tarot. So I'm going to go with the regular associations. So, so Page of Wands, wands for me is fire. Page of Wands signifies a youthful, impulsive, passionate, and creative nature, dynamite, and high energy. So just remember, like, pages are kind of like the youthful energy, sometimes messengers, sometimes children, and then filtered through the lens of the particular suit. So Page of Wands is a little bit of a firecracker. Adventurous youth and a high achiever, bold and enthusiastic, takes a risk. Page can also represent a message, and this fiery fellow suggests a message about a new creative venture or a hot note from a lover, possibly sexting. All right, Teresa, that's a little bit racy. Pages also symbolize new beginnings, such as a new project or job. All in all, this looks like good news. When reversed, again, you don't have to read with reversals. I did cover this in a previous episode, so you can go back and look about working with reversals if you're so inclined. This child becomes rebellious and prone to rash decisions. Think rebel without a cause, lack of maturity or confidence, or bad news. Seeing the red flags or ignoring the message because it's not the one you want. So, and traditionally speaking, the Page of Wands looks a bit like this with the big old staff. And he has salamanders on his tunic. And salamanders are traditionally showing up in the wand suit to symbolize that. Same thing with the Page of Cups on here, the tunic. Where you got the little fish talking to the guy. And then the tunic, I think, looks like water lilies, if I'm seeing correctly there. So remember, if you're having trouble interpreting a card, like just go to the card and describe what you're seeing. And then see how what you're describing, what you're seeing, how that is applicable to whatever question you were asking or whatever question your friend or your client was asking about. So Page of Pentacles. Page of Pentacles, the element is earth. The Page of Pentacles is the messenger who brings news of money and good fortune. So yeah, bling, bling, baby. And usually he's depicted holding up a big old pentacle there. Can also be the Page of Coins as well, or Page of Earth. This could be a promotion or raise, financial deal that finally goes through, a job offer, or a business venture that gets a thumbs up. If this card is representing a person, it's a young, studious type who is focused, methodical, obedient, and dedicated to the craft. Not in here, it could be an intern at your job or a particular career. Sometimes I've seen the Page of Pentacles come up like that. Reversed, it can indicate unwelcome news about money or an unexpected bill in the mail, a lack of focus or direction, and confusion about your goals and priorities. So, and Page of Pentacles is often on an open field, symbolizing the possibilities for greater growth. Again, pick up this book. It is so, so helpful, not just about court cards, but for tarot in general. It's really, really great. And then finally, we've got, I think I skipped over the swords. Of course I did. Page of Swords. Again, element of air. If you have your own associations, feel free to use them. The Page of Swords can symbolize a need to be alert. And notice how the Page of Swords is depicted. Notice about body language, especially when we're talking about court cards. Court cards are a figure on that background. So symbols that happen in the court card in the background may be important, but really the star of the show in a court card is that figure on the court card. So you want to pay attention to not only what they're wearing, but also what their body language is. You know, like sometimes you can't get a lot of information out of like the queens or the kings because usually they're both seated on thrones and they're not doing much, you know. But for the knights and for the pages, like especially the Page of Swords here, when I read the Page of Swords can symbolize I need to be alert, and it says here, on guard, the young Page of Swords stands in a defensive position as if he's ready to strike. But remember, it's not an offense, it's a defensive position. Look at that. So he's on his back leg, he's guarding, you know, he's alert because he needs to defend himself. So how could that energy or that interpretation play out from the question that you asked or the situation you were asking about? Pay attention, do your due diligence and gather information. Again, air is usually about conflict and communication in general as a suit. Important news might be coming in. This card may herald the solution to a problem, like cutting through, like using this big ass sword to cut through the thinking thicket. If this card represents a young person, it may be an intelligent youth who tends to be curious about the world and is quite independent. And then the reversed is hasty and impulsive. Someone jumping to conclusions or thinking the worst can also symbolize being unprepared for a conflict and do not engage in battle of wits if you come unarmed. So, Mendy has to run, but definitely, yep, catch the replay. It'll be there for you. Thank you for tuning in. All right, so we've gone through the pages. We only have really a couple minutes left before the hour, so I'm gonna speed it up a little bit. Remember, come back to this. You can pause it at any time when we do the replay or when you're watching the replay. Take notes if you'd like. I'm just going to speed it up a little bit because I'm podcasting with my girls from the Card Slingers podcast tonight. Woo! We're doing another episode, and we're going to have another episode in February. So Stay tuned for that. I will talk about that later. But we are podcasting again tonight. Well, recording. We're not releasing anything until February. So, but there's 2 episodes there if you guys want to check those out. So now we're going to go into the knights. So again, the knights to me are like the brash teenagers of the tarot. And then filtered through that particular element that's associated with that suit. So like, for example, the Knight of Wands, and I will get to this when we get to the Knight of Wands. The Knight of Wands is brash upon brash upon brash. Dina's suggesting a part 2 for this. That could be a thought. All right, you know what? I'll hold you to that. So I'm going to go through the knights, and then we're going to do next week. Come back Friday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we're going to do the queens and the kings, and we're going to wrap it all up. How about that? Sound good? Okay, so the knights, like I was saying before, the knights, brash teenagers of the tarot. And I'm not the only one that thinks that. My friend Sasha Graham, who wrote Tarot Diva, 365 tarot spreads, 365 tarot spells. She's quite prolific and she's awesome. She speaks about the court cards in Tarot Diva. That's another great book to pick up. Again, I will try and run through the book recommendations I have at the end of the episode. She also agrees that the knights to her like a teenager kind of energy, you know? So for like brash teenagers, when I come to the Knight of Wands, it's like Wands is fire. And then you've got brash teenager of Knight of Wands, the brashest of the brash. They just charge in. They don't give a fuck. They are just full of fire and vim and vigor. And for some situations, that's great. But in other situations, they put their foot in it, something fierce. I'll get to it when we get to the Knight of Wands, but hopefully that makes sense. So Knight of Cups. Knight of Cups, I really do like the Knight of Cups because it's such a nice energy to see. Off the top of my head, when I see the Knight of Cups, I think about like the knight in shining armor, the knight on a white horse coming, sailing in to rescue the damsel in distress. It's a very romantic card, but it is someone that does tend to wear their heart on their sleeve. Sometimes it indicates being in love for love's sake alone and not necessarily being in love with that person. They're like in love with love, the concept of love, not necessarily the person they're with. So it does have its downsides, but I do like the Knight of Cups. So Knight of Cups' element is water. The Knight of Cups symbolizes the dream lover or wearing your heart on your sleeve. See, I mean, Teresa and I have sometimes very similar ways of reading the cards too. The dreamy Knight of Cups is the romantic, flirty hero who leads with his heart. Think Prince Charming, the ideal sensitive lover. Knights are also action-oriented. And the presence of this card may be urging you to take action based on your feelings. What does your heart tell you? It can sometimes indicate a romantic or spiritual quest. And notice how, like, not only, so I talked about body language with the pages, but remember the knights, the knight itself is not a shining star in the card. Their horse is also a pretty prominent figure in the card. So not only look at what the knight is doing, look what the horse is doing. Is it rearing up? Is it charging ahead? Is the head down? Is it up? Are all 4 hooves placed on the ground? It could tell you a lot of information of how to interpret that particular card. So in this case, the knight's horse, like the knight's sitting there with the cup extended, almost as in like, here, take my love, take my heart. And the steed has the horse kind of like bowing low, you know. It's a very like kind of putting someone up on a pedestal too, you know, and it kind of plays out in the body language of not just the knight but also the horse, of that that concept of chivalry and that concept of courtly love. and maybe sometimes pining from afar as well, because a lot of the time, especially when you look at the mythology around King Arthur and Lancelot and Guinevere, that whole concept of forbidden love really comes into play. And it's not just like, this would happen a lot where that lady or whatever is already married, already betrothed to someone else, and the knight's code sometimes indicated they were almost like fighting monks. They would never marry, they would never have children, they would be all about the job, but sometimes they had that idea of that lady or that damsel in distress lady on a pedestal. So that's kind of where I get the association of maybe like unrequited love or love from afar when I sometimes see the Knight of Cups. Reverse, the Knight of Cups turns from a dream lover to a nightmare. Instead of being courtly, this fellow pulls back and turns passive-aggressive, conflict between the head and the heart, an inability to commit or lack of emotional depth, sometimes addictive tendencies. Sometimes this reversal says to be very clear on what is really being offered versus not before saying yes. So it's like the cup is being offered, but what is really being offered when you choose to get involved with this person? So I hope that makes sense. If people have any other ideas when they see the knights, go ahead and chime in. I would love to hear it. All right. So here's my guy, the Knight of Wands, like I was saying. Notice the steed. Notice the horse. That horse is just charging in, and so is the knight. He's got the baton raised, that wand raised. He's just charging in there. So Knight of Wands, element is fire. Fiery Knight of Wands tends to be intense, restless, and charismatic. Oh, yeah. There's a lot of charisma in the Wands suit. We'll talk about that when we get to the Queen of Wands as well. Knights are action oriented. Why can't I say that word? Anyway, and this one seems headed off for an adventure. This guy could be a touch arrogant and definitely full of bravado. If you're asking a question about whether to move forward or not, this card says go for it. Ride on with confidence and enthusiasm, but keep your feet on the ground so you don't burn out. Seek adventure, take the risk, bust a bold move. Now, when the Knight of Wands comes up reversed, it can indicate the person is not ready for the challenges before him or her. Inexperience leads to a fall. Confidence is dashed. Situation gets off to a brilliant start only to burn out and fade away. So it's like starting strong and then fizzling. And an unfinished job. The Knight of Wands reverse can also suggest a jealous nature or a hot-tempered person who is ruled by his or her passions. So like I was saying, brashest of the brash with the Knight of Wands. And again, those salamanders on the tunic there. Or tabard, sorry. All right. Now we've got the Knight of Swords. It's interesting because the Knight of Swords can kind of be like another side of the same coin of the Knight of Wands. But again, filter that through the suit that's coming up when you're dealing with court cards. It really tends to like help you focus a little bit more with your interpretation. So the Knight of Swords, the element is air. If you've ever had to step into a challenge and confront an injustice, you've channeled the energy of the Knight of Swords. So check out the Knight of Swords. There is a charging energy here, definitely. But notice that the front two hooves of the steed are on the ground and kind of like pushed back. So it almost echoes a little bit the stance in the Page of Swords. That defensive posture, like the knight is ready to go charging in, but the horse is kind of like pulling back, like, are you sure? So it definitely does have this tinge of like thinking things through a little bit more than like, say, the Knight of Wands. So I hope that makes sense. Hope everyone's still with me here. So need a hero. The Knight of Swords is the classic knight in shining armor, moving through the storm with sword drawn, ready to fight or to defend someone's honor. The Knight of Swords loves a good challenge. The energy is assertive, direct, and candid. This card can indicate the need to make a hasty decision without hesitation. So no hemming and hawing, onward. So it's just like sometimes you just have to make a decision based on the information that you have at the time. And there is sometimes an indication, especially when I see like the Two of Swords or the Lover's card as well, where people are hesitating, and they're hesitating because they want to make sure they have all of the information available to them before making an informed decision. And sometimes it's just like, hey, listen, sometimes you just have to act based on the information that you have at that time and hope for the best, and then course correct accordingly, and then make other decisions down the road. But like, sometimes you just got to make that decision based on the information that you have at that particular moment. Yeah. So Dina's saying, seems like a rough pivot. Yeah, it can be. Especially for that poor horse. Look at the face. Let me see if I can get it up close for you guys. Look at the horse's face. Can you see that? The horse is like, a guy. Pull up. So again, look at the card while you're interpreting it. So reverse, the Knight of Swords reversed, he loses his momentum. This can represent someone who is full of hot air, all talk, no action, no follow through, or being dishonest. The assertiveness can turn ugly and violent or impotent. If the card turns up in a reading, it's best to refrain from taking immediate action. Caution and patience are advised. So to me, it's kind of like what I was saying before with the horse's face. It's just like, pull up, guy. You don't have to do this right now. Katie says, horse is totally, I have to pull this up. I'm sorry. Horse is totally terrified. If I could name the episode that, I would. So that's the Knight of Swords. So what have we got left? Knight of Pentacles, is that it? Really? Gosh, I got through them a little bit faster than I thought. But we're still going to do Queens and Kings next episode. I think that's an excellent suggestion from Dina. Thank you. Sometimes we don't have to do it all in one episode, especially when the episode is running longer than an hour, right? I did get all of them, right? The knights? I think so. Dina says, like Lord of the Rings heading into spears. Yeah. Oh, I think I got all of the knights. Did I get all of the knights? I'm pretty sure I did. I started with a Knight of Cups, Knight of Wands, Knight of Swords. Yes. Okay, cool. So the Knight of Pentacles, my dear friend, the Knight of Pentacles, who really gets a bad rap some of the time because he's slow, he's steady, he's dependable. And you can see that in the card. So notice that all the hooves are on the ground. There's no movement there. He's just sitting there atop the horse with the pentacle in his hand. So, element is earth. The Knight of Pentacles suggests that diligent work and a methodical approach are the keys to greater growth. So, to me, when I see the Knight of Pentacles, I see slow and steady wins the race. While knights usually appear to be action-oriented and ready to leap into motion, the Knight of Pentacles stands still, gazing ahead with a freshly plowed field as his backdrop. The field represents the hard work already completed, and this practical knight is pausing to consider his next move. Pragmatic energy may be what is needed at this time, and strong and steady win the race. Again, Teresa, get out of my head. When reversed, his energy becomes scattered. He's unable to get things done and may become stagnant. Stubbornness gets in the way. Like the Page of Pentacles, when this card is reversed, focus is lost. So I'm going to end on the Knights, and we're going to pick back up the Queens and the Kings in next week's episode. But before I leave you guys, I don't want to leave you in the lurch. I want to give you some book recommendations so you can study up and continue on this, so that you don't have to wait until next week for me to talk about the Queens and Kings in order to like get a fuller scope of court card energy and how to look at court cards in an intelligent way to be able to make better interpretations and not be scared of them. You don't have to be scared of the court cards. So let me add on an item here. And I'm going to move this up and show it. So let's talk about book recommendations and resources for you guys talking about the court cards. Now, what I was using tonight was the Tarot Coloring Book by Teresa Reed, aka the Tarot Lady. This is my signed copy. The reason why it's over here, and I'm going to go ahead and put it back as I'm talking. The reason why it's over here is because I use it all the time in my home office, in my work, when for some reason I'm getting a brain fart or my brain is failing me. I like to use that book just for keywords and associations and to look at these symbols really, really quickly. I would also recommend not just this one here, which is a great beginner introductory book to tarot. This is Kitchen Table Tarot by Melissa Sonova. I'm actually going to get on the horn with Melissa in a few minutes to record another episode of our lovely Card Slingers Coast to Coast podcast with me, Melissa, and Jamie Elford talking about tarot. So I'd recommend this book, which is her first book, and also her second book, Tarot Elements, 5 Readings to Reset Your Life. It is an excellent book. I'm just going to put that back down there so you can see my face instead of my side boob. Oh my God, Melissa's here right now. Hi. I swear I'm going to be on time tonight for our recording. So hold on. Wait a minute. I have to pull this up. All right. Hold on. Shameless plug for Melissa. Oh my OMG, that's me. That's my girl right there. So I recommend Kitchen Table Tarot and also Tarot Elements. I do have Tarot Elements as well. It's in the other room, and I'm going to have my friend borrow it this weekend. So I don't have it to hold up right now. It's in the other room. I'm not going to go get it. But Tarot Elements is called Tarot Elements, 5 Readings to Reset Your Life. Melissa, go ahead and chime in if I'm getting that subtitle of it wrong. And that is, the 5 readings are based on the 5 elements as well. So since we've been talking about court cards all night, I think it would be a really excellent book for you guys to look into and read. Don't have to read it before next week's episode. It's okay. And then finally, like, there are so many good resources about court cards. Let me pull up my document so I can go ahead and drop some of these links in here. One great article is by Carrie Mallon, How to Read the Tarot Court Cards the Easiest Way. So I'm going to go ahead and drop that in here. Very quickly. Oh God, both of them are in here. So Melissa and Jamie are in here right now watching me and waiting for me to get finished with this so we can record another episode of Card Slingers Coast to Coast. I wish I could make this up, but I'm not making it up. They're here. Hi guys. I'll be right there. So Melissa originally wanted to call Tarot Elements 5 Readings to Unfuck Your Life because she is a swear bear like me. But we couldn't do that. And here is a shameless plug for our podcast together, the 3 of us. cardslingerscc.podbean.com is the website, but the first 2 episodes of our podcast are available wherever you subscribe to your podcasts, iTunes, I believe we're on Stitcher. I believe we are on Spotify. So go there and leave a kind review for us so that we can continue to make awesome episodes. And if you have any suggestions on what topics you want us to cover, please let us know. We would love to hear it. We love audience participation. Yeah. And everyone, they're stalking me. Katie's like, they are hassling. Yeah. This is nice though, because I stalk my friends as well. So I don't feel as alone where it's just like, oh, let me look at Melissa's website. Oh, let me look at Jamie's website. Okay. Sorry. So this is the, I've dropped in the article for Carrie Mellon's How to Read the Tarot Cards, the Tarot Cards the Easiest Way. We also did a tarot wrap when I was hosting tarot wrap, all about the tarot court cards. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in there, the Twitter moment for you guys. So you can go and check that out, what everyone thought about the questions that I asked about court cards. Because what I found is the more I get asked, the more I realize that I actually know a lot more than I think I do. And that was the beauty of tarot wrap. I would just ask questions about the tarot and people would answer. And I'm just like, see, you know the tarot better than you think you do. It's just because I asked you the question that you realize how much knowledge you actually have. So Dina says, I helped. Okay. What else? Let's see. I know that there's so much more information. Tarotthrones.com by Alison Cross. It used to be called, I think, This Game of Thrones. And that's all about court cards. Like the entire website and structure is all about tarot court cards. That is her specialty. That is what she covers. So that's Alison Cross's Tarot Thrones. So it's tarot-thrones.com. And then finally, another book that I have to recommend is, here's the link here, but it is Ethany's book. Called, I believe it's called Your Tarot Court or The Tarot Court. Let me, I've dropped that into the chat. And that is a book all about court cards as well. So, and I mentioned Ethany before, is awesome. So go ahead and check that out. And check out the Card Slingers podcast. So, we don't have time for Q&A tonight. I believe I did answer a lot of questions though as we went, so hopefully there are no lingering questions. And we will come back next week, Friday, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the live version of Tarot by Hilary episodes. And we will continue on court cards, looking at the queens of the tarot court and the kings of the tarot court before we wrap it up. Yes, this is a 2-part episode about the court cards. So thank you, everyone, for reminding me that I don't have to cram all of this information into one episode. We can do a 2-parter. It's completely fine and great. So thank you for reminding me about that, so I don't overextend myself and completely bore you guys with like a 2.5-hour long episode. So, and no weekend forecast this weekend because, you know, I got places to be. So thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for tuning in live. I appreciate it so much. And if you're watching the replay, thank you for watching the replay. I so appreciate it. And I love you guys. And you're the reason why I do these free workshops, because I want everyone to learn tarot. I think it's such an amazing tool, and amazing tool to know thyself and know people around you, better interact with the world, see what's coming and how to navigate your present so that you can bring your best future to yourself. So I am going to leave you guys tonight. I am Hilary. I am a professional tarot reader, demystifying the mystical and connecting you to your intuition because, yes, my friend, you have intuition. Go ahead and look at my website and book a reading with me if you want to get to know the cards a little bit better and see what's coming for you. And I will see you same time, same bat channel next week. Friday, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the live recording of this. And we will start with the queens of the tarot court. Have a great weekend.